I'll check up.
You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible. Who you do business with is more important than where they're located. Bank from the comfort of your own home with Emprise Bank. Coming up, the latest episode of the KC Laboratory Podcast with Ken Swanson, Craig Stout, and Matt Lane. Coming to you on the fastest growing sports media network in Kansas City. You can find all of our channels covering all the local teams wherever you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. Just search KCSN. And now, the latest episode of the KC Laboratory.
It's a live Super Bowl edition of the game preview for the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank, member FDIC. Maddie, I got emotional about 3 minutes before this started. I don't know why, but I am just all of a sudden just hyped, emotional, all this stuff right now.
Were you thinking about your hatred of Jalen Hurts and it just got you going? It just got you amped? Like, what's happening?
Must end. I'm sick of it. I blame Jordan, by the way.
Listen, let's not dwell on that. If you want to hear all of Kent's hatred for Jalen Hurts, the Chiefs
listen to the
defense
last three shows
versus the Eagles.
Read
offense.
my article.
That is earlier this week. If you go back to Monday's podcast, you can listen to the Chiefs defense versus the Eagles offense. We're pivoting to the other side of the ball. So no more Jalen Hurts talk, Kent.
Yeah, we already got done talking about how Jalen Hurts will react to this Chiefs defense earlier in the week. So this is a two-part game preview this week. We did the defense versus the Eagles offense earlier in the week. Today, we are going to be focusing on the Philly defense versus Patrick LeVon Mahomes, the greatest player of a generation, establishing his legacy against the Philadelphia Eagles defense. So that is the game plan today. We'll do our predictions at the end of this show as well. We'll be hanging around talking all things Chiefs offense versus Eagles defense. So that's the plan. Thanks everybody watching right now or listening. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Really appreciate everybody. Really, really do. Yeah, obviously we're pretty amped about this one. So we'll start here. The kind of doing the same structure we did earlier in the week for the other side of the ball, but Philly's defensive identity, Matthew.
Okay. Rush the passer with 4, get pressure, sack QB, rinse, repeat. I don't know if there's a whole lot more to it than that. Like, this isn't a diminishing on any of the other players or anything, but their defensive identity really isn't a whole lot more than that. They're great at it. Like, we can spend a lot of time talking about how when they want to really run up the arc and get deep pressure in the pocket, the defensive ends are just speed rushing from wide alignments, getting a great jump. The defensive tackles don't even try to really penetrate or not even really try to squeeze the pocket down that much. They just hold their ground. They try to look to watch a QB escaping through the A or B gap, disengage, get a sack there. Like, they do some great complementary rushing, whether it's deep in the pocket, up the middle, when they do decide to stunt. Like, there's so much we could talk about there. If Craig wants to go into that, he can. That's what their defense tries to do. They want to get pressure with 4, and everything else they do on defense centers around, hey, our defensive line's going to get pressure with 4. We have to cover for 2.5 seconds. So here's how this team gets by playing, well, cover 1, cover 3, rinse, repeat. Yes, there's going to be some quarter, half mixed in, but their coverage calls are not very mixed. They don't disguise it particularly well. They just kind of go out there and execute with high-end players and wait for that defensive line to do what the defensive line does.
Yeah, so here's the deal. It's Hassan Reddick. It's Brandon Graham. It's Fletcher Cox. It's Javon Hargrave. It's Josh Sweat. It's Jordan Davis. It's Linval Joseph. It's Robert Quinn. It's Ndamukong Suh. And it's Milton Williams. That is 10 dudes that I just listed there. And all 10 of those dudes would be in rotation in almost any line in the NFL right now. That's how they do it. And that's why they can rely on it. It's not as simple as, hey, tire these guys out. Try and keep making them rush 4 and keep making them try and beat their head against the wall. That won't work. They will just wholesale change out the line. It's like a hockey line. They'll put in the second team and it's just as good. You know, they're able to still disrupt the play. And that's what makes them so dangerous. There is no real combination that you're going to look at among this Eagles offensive line or defensive line and say, okay, when that guy's on the field, we're going to start trying to run this kind of stuff at him and try and maximize this sort of thing, because they'll just figure out a way to put another dude next to him and win on the defensive line. That is where it starts and where it ends. Yes, they've got talented players. That secondary is really good. James Bradbury, despite kind of languishing out there for a long time this offseason, has been really, really good this year. Darius Slay has continued to play pretty well. So those guys are going to be able to line up and take away stuff on the outside, funneling stuff to the inside to CJ Gardner-Johnson. They got Reed Blankenship back there. That's where it gets a little bit iffy in the middle of the field. But the corners on the outside and their ability to kind of be up in the receiver's face, disrupt timing, get rid of some of the quick throws, and allow that pass rush to get home quickly, no matter who it is that's out there, any of those 10 guys. It's just a recipe for disaster for pretty much any offense. It's almost offense proof because you can line up and do those sorts of things.
Well, every offense they've seen to this point, but I'm with you. Hey, look, Dak Prescott's the best quarterback they've seen to this point. But yeah, I think the identity, I think you guys have about pinned the identity down. So like this, it's going to run through that very dominant, deep front. The depth is the thing I think is very worth talking about. You're absolutely right. And, some situational pass rush ability like Milton Williams, is, he's down on the bottom of the depth chart, right? But being able to disrupt it, I think the back, I know it's insane. It's like, if you,
I know.
Here's the thing. Okay. Like if you just did this, if you took Robert Quinn, Milton Williams, Linval Joseph, Jordan Davis, and Ndamukong Suh, what does that group rank? What does that group rank?
I mean, it's above the middle of the pack for sure.
I think it's at least middle of the pack. I mean, there's a lot of teams like the Bears would kill for that. I mean, they had one of them, but like that was the Bears' best pass rusher, right? Like, yeah, I think plenty of teams would kill for that. But I think back in front end they do play well together. That giving them some time for that pass rush to get home, and they don't need a ton of time for the pass rush to get home. One thing I really appreciate about them too is mid-season they got gashed in the run game, and what did they do? They just went out and signed Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh on the same week, just to continue to load up on the defensive line. You can kind of see like the Eagles. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about this, but like the way the Eagles have roster built around Jalen Hurts, and just this roster and just his team in general has been really, really impressive. And I don't want to go too far back to the offense. We don't have to do too much on the offensive side of the ball, but obviously we know what they did.
He's trying to drag it back.
How did we get back?
Just wait a second, Matthew.
What is happening?
They went back and they went and got AJ Brown. That's a big move and a big swing. But I think you've seen them be very aggressive and intentional in building depth on the defensive side of the football. And we talked about Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph. They went and acquired CJ Gardner-Johnson, who I think there's a chance will be public enemy number one by like 5 minutes into the game for Chiefs fans. Like it's been very cordial here. It's been very cordial, I think, between Eagles and Chiefs fans. But the second Chauncey Gardner-Johnson does something stupid, which he will, it's just, I mean, it's going to go off the rails. But a lot of depth, a lot of talent has been acquired by the Eagles in an attempt to build a really complete roster around a cost-controlled quarterback, contract. And that defensive line absolutely is it. All right, before we go,
no, I just went. So I feel like I glossed over everything else their defense does besides the D-line. I think that's fair, right? I think for the first pass, that's absolutely fair for how this defense is structured. That said, and I think Craig did a good point, Darius Slay, James Bradbury, two very good boundary corners that can play man. The Bradbury, not as much, but Slay especially is very good in zone. Bradbury has some ups and downs when he's in zone, and I think that's probably what Brandon Ayuk was talking about when he was saying they had some stuff that they felt like they had going on. So, they have two good boundary corners. I think after that, though, that's where they start to struggle a little bit. And so what they do in order to kind of protect themselves, they do play a lot more single high coverages than a lot of teams in the NFL do right now. To Ken's point, a lot of that is they didn't play that many, or very good quarterbacks. They didn't play a lot of good offenses. It's easier to play single high, not have to keep 2 safeties deep when the only 2 good quarterbacks you play all year is Aaron Rodgers, 1 good performance, and then Dak Prescott. Like, that's the only good quarterbacks they've played for the past 3 months tops. So there is some structural stuff to their defense that I think we might see different in the Super Bowl, but for the most part, they protect the interior of that defense by playing single high most of the time. Then they can cycle in out of man and zone with ease. They're not locked into one or the other. They play a decently high rate of man compared to everybody else. And when they do play zone, it is a lot of cover 3. It's very much match principles. So it will play out just like man coverage far more often than you're thinking when you hear the word cover 3. They will have corners running with digs, running with deep crosses, because that's the way it gets, dividend out once everything starts going on. So they do, I don't want to say cool stuff necessarily, because it's pretty simple, but they protect their issues that they have over the middle of the field with this good boundary cornerback play. And they know they have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who can insert all over the place. They've gotten good play out of TJ Edwards at linebacker, even though he maybe isn't the most talented linebacker in the NFL. So I think they understand where their difficulties are on defense, and they do try to play around it and then really set that pass rush up to really get after it.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of, they're able to play with more dudes in the box to try and take away some of that stuff in the middle. Yes, can't mention the fact that, they went out and they signed Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh while Jordan Davis was hurt. And obviously he's back in the mix here, but it made a lot of sense for them to kind of stack the box a little bit, play a little more single high with those guys playing as well as they are. I'm curious to see kind of what happens when we go into that mode with the Chiefs in like 13 personnel. How are they going to counter that? They're not a team that loves to play base. They really aren't, because that takes some of their more dynamic players off the field. The Chiefs going to live in 13 personnel a little bit more to try and knock
them out.
They
really don't like dime either. Just they don't like dime that much either.
They just want to live in nickel, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But when the Chiefs go in 13 like we've seen them, as of late, I'm curious to see what sort of counters that they're going to have, because there's going to be something. It's not like they're just going to sit there. Gannon's not just going to sit there and be like, well, we're going to do what we're going to do and not try and counter what the Chiefs are, putting on the field. So I'm very curious to see what happens there if they stay in some more of those cover 3 shells when they've got 3 tight ends on the field, or are you going to see them kind of shift things around a little bit more, try and cover some of that and still be able to play in nickel with some lighter personnel and kind of dare the Chiefs to run rather than try and throw. Chiefs have been pretty good when doing that, though. So we'll see what happens.
We'll talk about all that here in just a second. I got one more follow-up question to all that. But first, we got to hear from DraftKings.
Are you ready for the biggest Sunday in sports? DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 57, has all the Super Bowl action you need. New customers can bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, all customers can get in on the Super Bowl 57 excitement with DraftKings Happy Hour Super Boosts. Check out the DraftKings Sportsbook app every day between 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to see what prop bet will be boosted. I have been loving these Super Bowl 57 prop bets. I've got a lot of them. Go check out the Octopus bet. I've got some money on that one. Go put some down on that. Here's what you got to do. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code KCSN. New customers can bet just $5 on Super Bowl 57 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code KCSN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See the show notes for details.
I had absolutely no idea what an octopus was.
I was there when Tucker found out what an octopus was.
Yeah.
So
it was great.
Thanks everybody watching right now. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, previewing Chiefs offense versus Eagles defense, and making our game predictions to close the show out here later. But I mean, do we think the Chiefs add a bunch of tight ends? Like, what do we think the splits look like on 12 and 13 personnel here?
Oh boy. Yeah. I don't know, because they've done some weird stuff. I mean, throughout the playoffs, they've gotten real weird with it. It sounds, I think you're gonna get a little bit of everything. I don't know if they are going to lean heavy into any specific grouping once you look back at the game in totality. I think we were kind of seeing it in the Jags game. Before Mahomes got hurt, they were clearly setting some stuff up with the heavier personnel. And then Mahomes getting hurt, not being able to really roll out of some of the stuff. And I assume it was going into play action with some rollouts with all the heavy condensed looks. that got removed. So we don't know where that was going. From what I saw, though, I think the Chiefs going heavy would help a little bit. You can go max protect a lot easier out of it. You get a lot of chips on this defensive end group that is very aggressive at getting upfield. You can slow them down pretty good with some chips. And it's not like the Eagles are a significant threat to confuse you on the back end. They're not going to get you that often with disguising their coverages, or B, they're not going to blitz that much. So if you do go a little heavier, you do give a little extra pass rush help. Yeah, you're limiting the guys in the routes, but you might give the, Mahomes and the quarterback a little bit more time back there. And I don't think the Eagles are the kind of defense that's going to punish that.
The Kansas City Chiefs, when throwing the ball out of 13 personnel this year, 39 of 53 for 568 yards, 8 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That's ridiculously efficient out of heavy personnel. It is ridiculously efficient. And it's like Maddie's saying there, they set stuff up out of it. You see them get vertical out of it. Justin Watson, player that they love to use in those 13 personnel sets, we can sit and talk about, what he brings to the offense. Guess what? He brings a lot in those 13 personnel looks and the ability to get downfield. We've seen MVS do it a little bit. We've seen him use a lot of stuff there. The problem is, if you see the Eagles try and back out of there and defend that, the Chiefs have 252 yards on 49 carries when running out of 13 personnel this year. That's 5.1 yards per carry. You don't want that either. Like, that's death by 1,000 cuts. So the Chiefs, I could see leaning on it a little bit heavier because I don't think Andy Reid fully got into his bag. We didn't really get to see a lot of it at the end of the year. We saw him prepping it. We saw him really working it and repping it plenty. And then we didn't get to see it as much. Even when Mahomes got hurt, and all these wide receivers get hurt, it makes sense that they'd go to heavy personnel, right? No, they didn't. They pulled back on it. They're saving it. They don't know what they want to do with it yet. If they're that efficient out of that personnel, it makes perfect sense that Andy Reid's going to show a little bit of it in the first 15, depending on how the Eagles counter it. I can see it being a heavy part of the game plan going forward. We know Andy uses that first 15 to set up the rest of the game. If he does that, he sees something and sees the way that Jonathan Gannon is approaching 13 personnel. I can see him shifting into that because they've been so efficient out of it and just trying to kind of ruin them with heavy personnel throughout the game.
I also just wonder if they have a little bit more tight end heavy in the call sheet just to help mitigate their potential exposure on receiver injury. Just having a little bit more ready in case they lose some guys to injury. Does sound like we're going to get a Juju Smith-Schuster and a Kadarius Toney by recent indications. So that is very helpful. We'll talk a little bit about that more in the second. I feel like we talked about their identity, where they're best at on the offensive side or on the defensive side of the ball for the Eagles. But like, where do we think that they struggle, Matthew?
When they play quarterbacks that don't stink. They struggle against the Dallas Cowboys. They gave up 40 points against the Green Bay Packers. And it's not like Aaron Rodgers was lighting the world on fire. They gave up 33 points. Team has not been exactly good when they play against quality offenses. The thing is, they have played 2 all year long. That's about it, right? So I think that's where you have to start. This Eagles defense, the defensive line is dominant. The pass rush is dominant. But guess where the pass rush looks better? Against average to subpar quarterback play. So all of a sudden, the few times you get to see them against good quarterbacks, and you go watch those games, there's sacks on Prescott, there's sacks on Rodgers. It's not like the defensive line is not playing good in those games. It's just the back end isn't always ending each play after 2.5 seconds. So now guys are coming open. Now, the fact that you play cover 1 or cover 3 on like 67% of your snaps, and the majority of the rest of those are fixed with quarter, half, you're a little predictable. Teams can get you into certain looks, or rather than getting you into just these certain looks, they can identify them a lot quicker. Both the Cowboys and the Packers had a lot of success going empty, because what that did is they just gave them a very simple identification on, is this going to be, if it's single high, it's going to be either man and cover 1, or it's going to be zone and cover 3. They don't really do much else in between. Now, it's hard to do a lot else in between versus empty, but the Eagles especially, they don't do anything else. It's real easy. It's real quick to tell. So that right away. You just have to get the ball out quickly. Sometimes you're going to buy time. I don't think that the Chiefs are going to have issues figuring out what coverage the Eagles are in. I don't think the Chiefs are going to have any, they got confused. They don't know what they're trying to do. It's just a matter of, can they execute what they need to execute up front to go ahead and run through with the play. I don't see a schematic. I don't see any schematic advantage for the Eagles against the Chiefs. There's player advantage. I don't see a schematic advantage in terms of how they play defense, how they call defense right now.
I think that there's significant player advantages too. Like it's enough to help kind of overwhelm some of these schematic stuff. Like it's one of those where, it's not broke, don't fix it. Just have your guys go out there. It's Jimmy's and Joe's, X's and O's sort of deal. I do think it's funny that you bring up their, arguably their two worst performances, from the defensive side of the ball against the Cowboys and against the Green Bay Packers. One of their other worst performances, and it didn't really show up on the stat sheet, was against the Cardinals. I mean, the Cardinals actually did a pretty good job of moving the ball against that team. Now, Kyler Murray did not play especially well there. You saw them not do a great job taking care of the ball, but those are arguably the three best quarterbacks they played this year. I mean, Kyler and Daniel Jones are duking it out for third with this group. And that's, but for real, that's what it is. And I think you've seen a lot of Eagles analysts and stuff like that are looking at this side of the ball, and they're saying a lot of the same things. It's like, man, there's a lot of guys, and they got to take over this game, because I watch Patrick Mahomes, and it's just, we talk about it all the time, how Mahomes is on another level than everybody else and all that. It really is for this Eagles team, because they haven't seen that this year very often. They haven't seen guys that can really put it on opposing defenses, where you just kind of stand around and you go, damn it, there's nothing that we can do on that play. We see it all the time as Chiefs fans undergo a murderer's row. You see Josh Allen, see Joe Burrow do something, and you're just like, man, you know what? Got. That's all it is. Eagles haven't had to do a lot of that and haven't had to defend a lot of that this year. And so that's really kind of the difference. They haven't had that experience. They haven't had that ability to see a lot of that elite talent under center or, back in the shotgun. You can say all you want about the receivers and the talent out there and the weapons and everything like that, but the guy getting him the ball is the MVP this year, and he has played like it all year long. It's really hard to prepare for something like that when you haven't seen it all year.
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes slated to win Aaron Rodgers Super Bowl later tonight. So Craig, you started talking about talent versus scheme, and I mean, talent can overwhelm scheme, but I don't, think talent overwhelms Patrick Mahomes very often. And I think that's the thing. I think that's what we're gonna find out, right? Is that's ultimately, I think the big storyline for me is, can this talent overcome the best player in the world? And I was thinking, you brought up empty, especially for a team that's just trying to get home with 4. Like, everything's going to be very well defined for them when they do go empty. And all empties aren't created equal. We just got done talking about 3 tight ends. The Chiefs can go empty with 13 personnel. They can mix and match their empty looks. They can pick, they can see how they're going to treat this stuff. Like, I don't know how, we'll see how much. I mean, you might see a little bit of empty early in the game from the Chiefs in the first 15, but also you might just want to see what they're going to play personnel grouping wise too. With, all right, what are you going to do with 13? Okay, we're gonna open you up here. Okay, what are you going to do with 12? We're going to open you up here. Like, I could see, I could see the Chiefs going in empty in 3 different personnel groupings. No doubt about it. Like, that would make too much. Like, that'd make a lot of sense. Like, that's something they could do. Maddie, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, along with the same line of going with, like, I mentioned empty to get your coverage ID. I think teams have had success too going with pre-snap motion against the Eagles. Same concept. You're going to figure out what coverage they're in, because they do run a rather smaller pool of coverages, and they don't disguise them. It's not a bad thing. They just don't disguise their coverages very well. There's been a little bit made these past couple days that Vic Fangio is a defensive consultant for them. A big part of Vic Fangio was rotating safeties late, playing a lot of 2 high, playing a lot of cover 2 type stuff, and rotating guys and hiding what you're doing. That's not what this defense does. They're pretty much like, hey, we're going to line up here. they might roll down a safety post snap. They might rip release it. That's about it. That's about as far as the disguising goes. So using pre-snap motion, going empty, just even aligning Blake Bell out wide and then motioning him in before the play starts. Some of the Chiefs will do all the time, and it seems so silly that you don't even notice it anymore, but that gives them a lot of information. They're going to be able to pick up on what the Eagles are doing. If the Eagles continue to play the way that they have all year, they'll be able to pick up real quick on what the Eagles are doing on the back end. And the absolute worst thing you can do against the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes is let him know what your defense is doing. We talk about all the crazy throws, the arm talent, the extending of plays. The Chiefs are nearly unbeatable when Mahomes is just in rhythm and quote unquote taking what the defense gives. If he has a good read on what's coming and he's getting the ball out on time, in rhythm, where it needs to go, it's almost curtains for any team they go up against. And I think the Eagles make it a little too easy based on what we've seen so far for a team like the Chiefs to know what they're doing.
Yeah, you want to tell me that Andy Reid's had 2 weeks to sit there and be like, yeah, we're pretty sure we know what coverage is coming when we see this tell, this tell, this tell, and this tell. Boy, that's bad. That's really, really bad. We've seen him destroy teams when they play a lot of, singular coverages and very basic stuff. But again, the Eagles are going to rely on their guys just executing the scheme better than everyone else. We've seen other teams do that with plenty of success. The Buffalo Bills do that on defense every single year. And they just say, hey, we're going to do it better than everybody else. We're going to rely on our guys to do it. I can see the Eagles just saying, hey, this is what got us here. We believe Hassan Reddick and that defensive line is going to affect enough of the play. Darius Slay and James Bradbury are going to be able to shut guys down enough on the boundary. We'll take whatever else we get. They're saying, hey, if Jet McKinnon wants to beat us or Kadarius Toney wants to beat us, so be it. We'll let that happen. Problem is, Andy Reid's really good at designing game plans around those tertiary components and making teams pay for not accounting for them.
Well, and just taking what the defense gives you, like Mahomes has gotten significantly better about that. And knock on wood, the ball protection from the guys he's been doing it to has been outstanding this year relative to last year. There's not as many drops. There's not as many fumbles. The ball protection has been very, very good. And so if you are going to give easy completions away to Patrick Mahomes, especially with the way this offense can be structured, you're going to give some plays up that you don't want. They're going to turn into bigger plays. We've seen that happen. We've seen it happen with Marquez Valdez-Scantling kind of running in orbit motion and being in the flat by himself. Mahomes is so good now about getting the ball out of his hands, putting the ball in the hands of his playmakers. And actually that might play into the hands of the Chiefs a little bit too, especially with where you're trying to manage the, Mahomes injury a little bit. Like, I don't know, like there's some benefits to all that too. So there's just, if you're going to give stuff away, great. I'll take it. Obviously I'd want some explosive plays, but I'll keep taking positive yards up and down the field. That's fine by me. One thing I do like is, we talk about the Fangio, tree, the Fangio structure. Maybe it's the Eagles aren't a apples to apples, they're not doing everything Fangio does, right? But the Chiefs have a lot of reps against Fangio defenses or Fangio disciple defenses too.
They were pretty darn good against it this year as well.
Yeah. They built a team to defend it. Like the NFL was going that way. They were. Yeah. Everybody fell in love with Vic's defenses and the late rotations, playing out of those two high structures and rotating into stuff.
Great
late
defense.
Safety rotations. It's great defense.
Great structure.
Absolutely. It's wonderful. It helps limit explosive plays, keeps everything in front of you, and does a good job of mixing things up late, making quarterbacks stop and think, especially with this defensive line. That's what you want. Problem is, Andy Reid and the Chiefs went, hey, we know that's coming. We know we're going to have to be dealing with that in the division, let alone in the rest of the NFL. Let's figure out a way to try and line up and beat it. So I went out and got personnel, changed up the offense. And that's why it's been so impressive to watch this year, because they're zigging when everybody else is zagging. So if the Eagles decide, hey, we're going to switch it up, we're going to lean more on some of the Vic principles, I can see the Chiefs just maybe after a couple of drives of being confused, hey, we weren't expecting this, come out and just go, oh, we know how to beat this, and switch into their Chargers game plan or something like that to try and come out and beat that sort of defense.
How big do we think the run game is going to be in this game, Matthew?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I don't know. Doesn't matter. The Eagles have been run on this year because of how they play their defense, the way it is structured a little bit. You have a defensive line, especially defensive ends that are only caring about the sack, and they're playing the run on the way to the quarterback, right? So you're almost like dealing with, instead of 2 edge defenders, you have like a half edge defender on either side, because that's just not what they're trying to do. And then you have adequate linebacker play behind it. So you don't have an elite safety. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's a good safety, great safety. He's not exactly a run stuffing dynamic box safety. So you don't really have the guys to stop the run. That's where they go out and they sign Sue and Linval Joseph in the exact same week that they got run all over. So I think they understand the issue. Those two have helped, but they haven't turned them into a dominant run game. So yeah, maybe there's a few times in this game where the Chiefs get a favorable look and they pull off a 5, 6, 7 yard gain just to stay ahead of the sticks. I think there's going to be a drive or two like that happens, to where the run game, the Chiefs kind of lean on it. And then we've seen the Chiefs do it in plenty of times to all of a sudden pull out a drive where they run the ball 7 out of 10 plays and they have a lot of success doing it. Then they get away from it again. It's all part of that Andy Reid method here to the madness of setting stuff up, getting what they want. But I ultimately don't think the run game is going to matter.
I look at it this way. I'm looking at, the passing yards allowed. This defense, again, they haven't played a whole lot of quarterbacks, but they made them all look bad. They really have. The games that they have allowed bigger yardage, they allow 304 passing yards to the Dallas Cowboys. That was saddled with 115 yards rushing. They had to go into more of a passing shell. Cowboys were able to run the ball against them. Then you go against the Packers, 236 yards passing. They have 106 yards rushing. Now, the Packers run the ball pretty well, so that's a decent job. It's still over 100 yards. The Arizona Cardinals, 239 yards passing, 124 yards rushing. So every team that's had any success moving the ball through the air has also had success running the ball. And that's dangerous. I think that's why those games feel like the way that they do, especially the Packers and the Cowboys games. When you go back and you watch them, they just seem a little bit overwhelmed because for the first time, they're having to defend the pass at a high level, having to defend elite weapons or against a good quarterback. And so they have to shift and drop, and they give up more on the inside. And 2 of those games, Packers and the Cowboys, those were with those stud defensive linemen in the middle there, those run pluggers. They still allowed that kind of yardage on the ground. So I can see the Chiefs getting them spread out a little bit more, maybe opening like the third quarter and saying, hey, guess what? We're going to come out. We're going to have a drive where we're just going to pound the rock, and finding success before the Eagles can make an adjustment again, try and steal a drive on the ground, rack up some yardage, make them think a little bit more on defense, and knock them out of any adjustments that we can see. That's really where I can see maybe the run game coming into play a little bit more, because the Eagles are having to sit back so far. If they're in too high, if they're having to kind of play back a little bit more, try and take advantage of that early in the second half.
One other thing, this would be like an Andy Reid first, but this is the Super Bowl. Wouldn't hate messing around with a possession and tempo too. Just go no huddle.
Won't happen.
I know.
Yeah, nope. Just hold it. Just swallow that pipe dream.
I'm aware. But I just think about if you get heavier personnel on the field at some point, you convert a third and short, and you got Ndamukong Kong and Linval Joseph, just go no huddle and see what happens. But just, I don't think
I get it.
But
I do.
That's a great. We talk about breaking tendencies.
Yeah,
that's breaking a 20-year tendency right there.
Yeah, Kent will have a pants problem if that happens.
I've been talking about tempo since Patrick Mahomes became the quarterback, like legitimately. One interesting thing, Patrick Mahomes on a bum ankle, they dropped back 70% of the time against the Bengals. So we'll see. We'll see if they try to get that run game going. I would be really dumb if I didn't ask Matthew if there's any big things he wants to cover on the offensive side before we move on.
Oh, for sure. The biggest matchup of the game. The Eagles are really good when they play cover one. Really, really, really good when they play cover one, actually. They play cover one just under 28% of the time. They allow just under 7 yards from pass per attempt. Mahomes, 9 touchdowns, 4 interceptions when playing against cover one. Not exactly his best coverage to go against. And then you look at the Chiefs receivers. Juju Smith-Schuster, hurt, not hurt. MVS, they don't really have guys that are well equipped to beating man coverage, especially against good corners like Bradbury, like Slay. So what's that matchup going to look like for the Chiefs? I think this would be a game where the Eagles probably should play cover one on every third down. I don't see any reason that they shouldn't, unless the Chiefs are beating the brakes off of it, which don't put it past Andy to come out here and do something with this. It's just the Eagles in cover one are good. The Chiefs against cover one, that's probably their worst coverage to go up against, and it's mostly due to the receivers. If Travis Kelce isn't getting favorable looks, which listen, there's going to be another conversation, maybe in the player to watch category, they have no one that can cover him at all. And they don't really bracket guys at all. So that's interesting to watch. But outside of him, they don't have great matchups versus man coverage. So I think the Eagles should really lean into that. The way you traditionally are going to go ahead and beat cover one is going to be run a lot of mesh stuff. You're going to run a lot of switch releases. You're going to get double moves, things like that. What does that take? Time. What do the Eagles essentially assume you're not going to have because of their 4-man pass rush? Time. So like that's where it works really well in this game. The biggest thing to come back though, screens and getting Jerick McKinnon out in space. Like make those linebackers run with McKinnon, make those linebackers get out with Kadarius Toney on jet motion. Like the Chiefs can do stuff against it. I'm going to be interested to see what Andy Reid and this Chiefs offense has cooked up the beat man coverage, because I fully anticipate the Eagles leaning heavily into it.
And on top of all of that, the part about getting 5 in the route, especially quickly. If you got Jerick McKinnon getting out in the route very, very quickly there, and you got a linebacker out there, you've got rushers that are trying to get past, trying to get quick pressure, typically around the outside. Like Hassan Reddick is a speed rusher. He's not necessarily a power guy, so he's going to try and get around the outside. Patrick Mahomes is going to try and get his wheels on. Now, I know he's hurt. I know that
I was going out. Yeah.
But you got guys without their eyes in the backfield. And how many times does it take of Patrick Mahomes, if he can, escaping out of the pocket and being able to run the ball? We saw against the Bengals, the want to was there, and the body was not quite willing for that. Is 2 weeks enough to where he can get some of that scrambling ability back? Because if he can, that's really scary for a team that wants to play as much cover one as they do. You're turning your back on a guy that does a good job of manipulating the pocket, does a good job, especially this year, of stepping up and taking what's there, taking those extra 6, 8, 10 yards that are easy on the ground for him. I can see lots of situations, especially with a speed rusher trying to get up the arc there, that Patrick Mahomes is just going to step up and through. And with 5 in the route, everybody all spread out, it is very hard to corral him, keep an eye on him, and limit him from picking up. Again, I'm not talking about, a 25-yard rush here. I'm talking about, turning some of these plays into quick 5s, because that's really, really difficult. And that's how you can knock a team out of some of their more comfortable cover one looks, is by getting a quarterback on the move. We talked about it on defense, that you can't play that. You got to play a lot more zone, keep eyes in the backfield against Jalen Hurts. You don't want Patrick Mahomes to start to heat up on the ground a little bit to try and get the ball rolling, because then as a defense, it's really, really hard to do what you're best at.
That's what I'm fascinated by, is Mahomes' legs. And I think we talked about it early in the week with the props and stuff. I think Mahomes over under was 20.5 yards. And, how healthy he is to run could be a big factor in this game. You talk, maybe they're not going to bracket or double Kelce, but if they do choose to double, if I was going to get very, very specific, Milton Williams rushes for a step. If it rushes for a step and spies, you double Kelce, you still might have 5 on the route, and your edge rusher still might win. Those are some, and so you've got Milton Williams versus he's a good kind of undersized interior rusher versus a Patrick Mahomes, who's hobbling a little bit. I could see the Eagles trying something a little bit like that, just being very specific to take away Kelce, and I don't know, stuff like that just fascinates me. Is obviously you'd rather be running against 2-man, but man coverage still a lot of backs turn, to your point. There still can be some guys with eyes on the quarterback closing late, but it could be a very, very big factor. All right, players to watch: Matthew No, Craig, sorry.
Oh
Forgot.
man, I wanted him to be confused again. I was gonna enjoy that.
Not even paying attention.
My player to watch is arguably the hinge point of this game, and it's Orlando Brown Jr. If Orlando Brown Jr. has a bad day against the edges of this Philadelphia Eagles defensive line, this is exactly the scenario that the Eagles have gotten themselves into throughout the year and why they've been so dominant, especially against the pass. They get after tackles off the edge, they create havoc, they ruin game plans. Orlando Brown Jr. has not had his best playoffs. He certainly has not. Did not play particularly well against the Jaguars to start that game. Rebounded a little bit. Did not play particularly well to start against the Bengals. Again, rebounded in that game. I don't want the rebound. It would be awesome if he came out and he's able to play at a high level. This defensive line is going to get theirs. I mean, if you see Hassan Reddick beat him once or twice, it's going to happen because it's the exact type of guy that gives him the most trouble. But if he can hold his own enough and give Patrick Mahomes enough time, they can ruin this Philadelphia Eagles defense through the air. And that is just devastating for all the reasons that we talked about earlier. That gets them in their bag. They can get into the run game. There's so many other things that can go wrong for this Eagles defense. It is predicated on that pressure, especially off the edge. And Orlando Brown Jr. can do a lot to try and stop it. So if he has a great game, he could single-handedly kind of tilt this in the Chiefs' favor.
So I hinted at it. I'm going with Travis Kelce. It's a little bit of a low-hanging fruit, and I try not to do it too awful much, especially during the offseason or anything like that. I don't like to talk about Travis Kelce because I think we all know that he's pretty good. But I don't think the Eagles can match up with him. I don't see anybody on this defense that matches up well with Travis Kelce. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's a good safety. He's 5'10", 5'11". Yeah, he's a little bit thicker and he's very good in coverage. That's not end all be all, but Travis Kelce's a big tight end. People don't understand. He's a big tight end that just happens to also be a really good wide receiver. So you can't really match those two up. They don't have a linebacker that has those kind of coverage skills. Their best bet might be a Kaiser White, but that's not where they've liked to use him when they do go man. They don't want to go put him out there, especially when the Chiefs are getting Kelce out in the slot and not just aligning him in line, which I doubt they do a whole lot in this game. They're probably going to try to keep him out in space. If they can get him matched up in zones against the Nevonte Maddox or some of these other DBs, if they have Reed Blankenship having to get out there on the field, if they want to get out there, roll onto him, Marcus Epps coming down, they have a lot of matchups that I just don't think Eagles would feel comfortable with Travis Kelce. And there has been, I know Fran Duffy, when he was talking to BJ, did float James Bradbury potentially going to cover Travis Kelce, but I don't know. James Bradbury hasn't done a lot of slot work. It's not like the Chiefs are going to go 3-by-1 and give them an easy Kelce versus Bradbury matchup on the outside. And even when they do, we got a long list of all pro corners and safeties that have had their ankle snatched by Travis Kelce. So maybe this is the best case scenario. Maybe you let the Eagles get weaker on one boundary. You get, put a guy that's not used to playing in the slot on a tight end in the slot. Let him think he can do it one-on-one and still get beat up in it. And then now you also have a Juju versus, I guess, Avonte Maddox kicks out wide. I don't know who goes and plays boundary corner for them. It's just, I just don't see a good avenue. So I think Travis Kelce has a monster game. He always does in the playoffs. I just don't even see the route for the Eagles to stop him unless they are going to truly double team him. And then a lot of open space.
This podcast will remain on ankle watch. And by that, I don't mean Patrick Lavon Mahomes. This time, I mean Kadarius Toney. If you go back and watch the Bengals game, I think you were on the verge of having a big Kadarius Toney game, a big usage for Kadarius Toney. And I think I heard I think it was James Palmer today talking a little bit about there's a big call sheet with Toney in mind. There's a lot of plays they want to run with Toney in mind, and there's a very obvious connection between Patrick Mahomes and Kadarius Toney that's established very quickly here. I could not agree more. Patrick Mahomes seems to trust Toney. Toney seems to get opportunities. Toney is the most dynamic athlete that this team has on the offensive side of the football, and he's a guy that's capable of making some big plays. His health is crucial, and the same can be said about Juju Smith-Schuster, both of these guys. As many bodies capable as you have for the next 60 minutes of football, very, very important to the success of this offense. If you can get a capable version of Kadarius Toney, that's huge. Same can be said about Juju Smith-Schuster. I'm on ankle watch. I'm on injury watch for both of these guys, but I think specifically Kadarius Toney is my player to watch and how he's able to be utilized and how much he's able to be utilized. All right. Last one of the year. Wow. Prediction time. Matthew.
Me? Why?
Yeah.
Why do you do this to me? I don't like this. Okay.
Fine. You want Craig to go?
No, I got this. Well, I'm going to make this short and sweet. We've been going a little while here. I think we've gotten a lot of our takes on this. The longer we dive into this, the more I watch the Eagles, the more I watch the Chiefs, the more I think about this game. I usually do a pretty good job removing like my fandom and my desire for the Chiefs to win to impact a lot of this. Like this is why I get criticized a lot for being negative, not being as high on the Chiefs as normal. Like I do a pretty good job at it. I'm having a hard time this week not treating this as from a fan perspective, because I really struggled to see the avenues in which the Eagles beat the Chiefs unless their offensive and defensive line show up, play the best games of their life. They do it for 60 minutes, and they do so at such a level that the Chiefs absolutely can't compete. Both their offensive and defensive line have to match what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive line did in the Super Bowl versus a bunch of backups, and they have to do it for 60 minutes on two sides of the ball. That's the only real avenue that in my brain right now, I see the Eagles beating the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs have the best two coaches in this game. They have the best three players in this football game. I don't see how the Eagles win this game. I actually think the Chiefs win comfortably. I'm going to take them 31-23 as a final score, and I don't even know if it's going to be that close at the end. I think if the Chiefs jump out to an early lead, and I think they're going to, I don't think this Eagles offense is built to come back. I don't think this Eagles offense starts really getting in rhythm until later in the game. I think the Chiefs kind of take control. Andy Reid's not one to run it up, but it is the Super Bowl, so I don't think he's going to go completely foot off the gas here. I have a hard time seeing schematically, and when you start breaking it down beyond, they have great offensive and defensive lines, I have a hard time believing or seeing the path for the Eagles winning this game.
The Philadelphia Eagles have a dynamic offense. They can get at you so many different ways on the ground. They've got two really great weapons and a good tight end. They've got a quarterback who is in the running for MVP. I know he hasn't played well down the stretch since he's been hurt, but he's got 2 weeks. We might see closer to that version of that player when the Chiefs line up against them this weekend. They've also got a set of defensive linemen that they can just mix and match and ruin the lives of every offense they have. Two really good corners out there that can take away stuff on the outside. It's a recipe for disaster for any offense they face. It doesn't matter. Patrick Mahomes is out there. He is going to ruin this. They have not played very many good quarterbacks. They have certainly not played very many good quarterbacks who are being orchestrated by one of the best postseason minds that is out there in Andy Reid. Andy Reid, the schemer, will come out and make life very difficult for this Philadelphia Eagles defense. The way that this Eagles defense can counter that is by having bad quarterback play. That is not going to happen from Patrick LeVon Mahomes. This defense, when we switch over there, Steve Spagnuolo is arguably, and I mean this, arguably the best postseason defensive coordinator in the modern era. It is him, it is Romeo Crennel, and that's the list. That is all of it. This is a situation where Steve Spagnuolo is going to pick up on tendencies. He is going to find ways to make these players be in the right spots. We have seen throughout this season this defense grow into their shoes. It is great to close out the season. Steve Spagnuolo schematically is going to come out there and be able to handle business. That means you've got, like Maddie said, the best two coaches in this game. You've got the best player in the world in this game, and you've got a defensive group that is just being overlooked for the second week in a row out of here that is going to line up and be able to dominate this game. I've got the Chiefs winning this one again, comfortably. I too have the Chiefs scoring 31, but the Eagles only scoring 20, meaning the Chiefs defense allows 20, 20, and 20 points in every game this postseason this year.
I have been trying to figure out how to communicate my emotions all day. knowing that we were about to predict a Super Bowl. And like a phrase that keeps coming back to me is real ones know. You know, the real ones know. The fans that have been through a lot with this organization, that know those small little intricacies when you see a Jackie Battle reference. The real ones get it. It's a badge of honor for a lot of people that have seen a lot of Chiefs football. And we've all been through a lot of Chiefs football here. And the last 4 years have been incredible. We've seen 3 Super Bowls. We've seen 3. And this one feels way different than the other 2 in so many different ways. I'm not predicting this game or going off of vibes because I don't think it's just vibes. I think when I go and look at the real ones out on Twitter, I don't see a lot of people running their mouth with a lot of, trash talk in Chiefs Kingdom. What I see is this weird, eerie, quiet, unwavering confidence that's like permeated genuine throughout the entire fan base. But I think it's because the team shows this just eerie, weird, unwavering confidence heading into this game. You can tell the coaches, the players, and the fans. You can tell. You can tell there's something up in Kansas City. You can tell that there's something up within this fan base. And it's not because we're just going off vibes. We've consumed a lot of Chiefs in our existence. We've been through this 3 times. We know what's up this week. We know how to handle this week. And we can feel what's going on this week. We know what's at stake. We know how good the Philadelphia Eagles are. We know how the Philadelphia Eagles can beat the Kansas City Chiefs. We know all of that. We have processed it. We have went through it. And all that came out was 3 words. Patrick LaVon Mahomes. They don't have an answer for him. They don't have an answer for him on one ankle. Nobody has an answer for him. He is the best player in a generation. And he's going to start coming for Tom Brady's legacy with a 2nd Super Bowl. 31-20. Real ones know. We'll talk to you after the Chiefs.